And I'm going to introduce David Weiss. I should probably mention, what have we got coming up next semester for the treatise?
Lori Scheck and Wayne Kestenbaum.
Lori Scheck, Wayne, you'll get emails about this. Lori Scheck, the poet Lori Scheck, Wayne Kestenbaum is going to be reading. Denez Smith will be here, which I'm super excited about too. So we have a lot of really cool things coming up next semester, and a few more things in the pipeline. So it's possible that we will be doing a book release for Jeffrey Babbitt, for instance. All this has yet to be scheduled, so but keep an eye out. We'll be sending emails. But on to the important business of the evening. David Weiss, in addition to being a beloved professor here at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, is the author of 3 collections of poems and a novel, as well as numerous essays on poetry. He's been the editor-in-chief of Seneca Review for many years, and he also happens to be one of my best and truest friends. He was on the hiring committee that hired me. He's mentored me through some of my toughest teaching moments and writing moments and parenting moments and human being moments the last few years. I remember how he would go out of his way to follow me into parking lots when I was pregnant in the dead of my first Geneva winter, secretly pregnant in the dead of my first Geneva winter, just so that he knew I was, just so that he could scrape off the windshield while I sat in the car while it was warming up. I have drunk countless cups of furniture polish flavored double bergamot tea with him while co-editing the Hybrid Forms Beyond Category issue of Seneca Review. I've broken bread with countless visiting Trieste writers alongside him, and he's helped me move a lot of my heaviest furniture. David is such a true friend to me that it would be easy if he had written an average sort of book of poems for me to say nice things about it. As a poet myself, I'm good at saying nice things about average poems. But Perfect Crime is not an average book of poems. It's terrific, truly a pleasure to read and a pleasure to teach. Reading these poems is like having a cup of coffee with the Delphic oracle, full of the chicken and egg type paradox of cause and effect, full of the everyday shot through with peepholes into the mythic. These are poems that read like riddles, like crime scenes. They're poems in, quote, the mystery genre. You know, something's happened and there are clues, ubiquitous as rain, books of them, the 9 parts, a lead pipe, a shattered wristwatch, perfume that makes you swoon. These poems have causes that are difficult to detect, effects that multiply and replenish. Between cause and effect, there is often a bottleneck, a pinch, a pivot place in the poem where something you thought was an effect turns out to be having consequences of its own, making it hard to distinguish which came first. Sometimes, like clues in a mystery, these poems draw attention to exactly the words we're usually supposed to forget. Words like the humble pronoun it. It is supposed to be a stand-in for something else, a finger pointing away from itself, as with the phrase, they take a stab at it. Usually the it matters less in that phrase than the trying, than the stab taking, except Weiss follows the phrase, they take a stab at it, by calling attention to the it, by materializing it, by making us remember that it is an actual physical word. He writes, it, the placeholder which denotes nothing in itself, which bolts in the presence of special pleading. And suddenly all the it's in the whole book take on a life of their own. They become clues. A number of the poems start their very first lines with that placeholder word, that word that's supposed to point back to an antecedent, to a thing that came before, except when a word is the very first word in a poem, nothing came before. It is all we've got, as with these first lines of poems. It's a fine line between sunlight and shadow, or you can hardly make it out, or it works this way, you go faster than portraiture can follow, or and then it's over and the sun comes out. Sometimes it is a mystery withheld, as with the woman behind the counter. She'll unlock the glass case for you, she'll take it out and show you how it works. It's beautiful the way a lacquered Chinese box with a hidden latch opens with just the right touch. It's no emptier inside than you are. Sometimes it is a character. It's so quiet at this hour you can't tell if it's suspense or aftermath, if it's night ending or a storm about to break. And it gives so little trouble. And You want it both ways, and even then it wouldn't matter. Do you hear it? Has David Weiss turned the placeholder word into clue, into cause for you? Me, I'm startled into being a different reader than I was. When I read Perfect Crime, I'm a reader turned detective. I pay attention to the clues. I read for the hidden cause. And I'm going to read a whole poem, but it's really doing the thing that I said. Here it comes, straight toward you, no getting out of the way. The phone call in the dead of night, the lights, then the sky going out, mud crushing the living room walls. Here it comes, the refrain beneath the chatter in the system. Open your arms to it. It might be the thing made clear, a hand outstretched, the long lost. A blue heron undulates across the glittering river like a line of verse, an answer that only feels like one. Here it comes. What a true pleasure to introduce my colleague, my friend, my fellow poet, David Weiss.
Please don't. Please don't, she said. The ditches were shiny with water, nervy with wind. He was standing too close, across the road. She held a suitcase with a handle between its latches. It was spring, bright, cold, nothing yet starting to grow. Her coat was too thin. She had no sweater on. He much too close, his head in his hands. Please don't, she said to the knives in the air. From the cold, her eyes teared. A car stopped. She got in. She looked around. The look said, please don't tell what train I'm on. He placed a stone at her head, a stone at her feet. North was south, west was east. It was colder than she was, colder than him. Bells like talons came down from the sky. Please don't, she'd said. Don't make this something it's not. Birds were being flown away, no tears in their eyes. A dog stood on 3 legs, panting by the woods, all bone and skin. It was home, if home were no such thing. Hardly spring, no gold in the goldenrod, burrs on the burdock. Where she was going, harder than gone. The stone was for his head. The dog was by his feet. There wasn't anything he wouldn't have done. There wasn't anything she didn't mean by please don't. That poem is not in the book. I always wanted to start a reading without saying anything first. Like sometimes you go to movies and there's a movie where there's no credits or the director's doing anything before it starts, then you tell you, I kind of like that. I almost chickened out, but I didn't. So now the credits, instead of coming at the end, the credits are going to come after the first scene. So let me thank Catherine for arranging this whole thing, for her lovely introduction. Thank you all for being here. It's rather great. I want to thank the people I dedicated the book to, Steve Crusisto and Jim Brenner, who both taught here. Steve worked here. Jim taught here for a long time, both splendid poets, and people with whom I've had the best conversations about almost everything, mostly going to baseball games in stadiums we've never been to far away, just driving to get there. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you, Bob Hurst, the publisher. Got books back there. You made it. So leaving Halsey's, you didn't go by way of Utica, right? This time.
We went the wrong way.
Yeah.
We went okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to read just I'm going to end with a few poems also not from the book that I've written later, just a couple. But I'll read a sampling of poems from Perfect Crime. Maybe some will be the ones that have all the hits in them. We'll see what I ended up, in fact, doing when I chose them. first poem. I need my glasses for this one. It's a book. When a clock has no face, a ruler, no length, a sister, no sibs, a father, no fibs, when the moon has no planet, ink thinks its own thoughts, insomnia is narcoleptic, and the large cross-dresses as the small. When a laugh originates as a cloud, a house opens its door to the elements, and the time a falling body takes to take flight is a unit of measure. When a beetle ends its life as a lute, and out beyond the hospice of vengeance, tolerance tends its rose of lavender, then you know you're mouthing despair's jump rope song. So jump, jump. All right, so either if you're interested in perfect crimes, which you'd have to say are things that are kind of non-narrative. A perfect crime can either be an unsolved crime, or, and here's the rub, it can be a crime so perfect you don't know that there's been a crime. This is the poem I was supposed to read earlier, just a little earlier, I just started. But here's a haiku, kind of, which sort of gets at that. It goes this way. The scene of the crime, so perfect, the scene is just scenery. Okay, so this one's about the toolbox. You know, it may or may not help. It's all there in the toolbox. Oh, let me just stop and say, everyone know what a cenotaph is? For a cenotaph, it's a kind of a monument for the dead. Okay. Probably didn't need to say that. It's all there in the toolbox. The team of oxen, the underground spring, the 7 ages of man, escape routes, mnemonics, a map of promises, the foundation walls. The one who's not a suspect gave it to you. Nothing missing or lost, not the pas de deux or the porch swing, no mother love beside the vice scripts or the blueprints blowing through the rows of rusted wheat. Not the cenotaph lit by heat lightning or what he said, she said. Useless as it is and heavy, you pick through it, surprised at what you find, surprised at who you found. So, I suppose one of the perfect crimes that means you can't tell the scene from the scenery could just be a thing like time itself, right? And you know, there are some clues for perfect crimes, like the moment somebody does the tautology and says, it is what it is, you know you're in the presence of a perfect crime. Or somebody says, oh, that's a crying shame. You know you're in the presence of a perfect crime, right? There are lots of other little clues like this. You have to develop some of your own. But there they are, right? Right? No one to blame, right? Or we say no one to blame but ourselves, well, which is, of course, also true. Okay. And none of these have titles, by the way. They're all sort of they're all separate, but they're book length in the sense that it's just an obsessive concentration on some ideas, right? Time's petticoat has no talk, no tick, no intervals, no numbers, a satin of pure immateriality. It would look like a rose opening like a map, its petals brightening without getting brighter, light from the beginning, light from the end. It would look like a rose, but it doesn't. It would look like old Kronos clutching his groin, semen and plasma, all the function words, seeping into the sea, but it doesn't. Time is unlit, like us at night in bed. touch approaching indistinguishability, pure duration, pure penetration. All the light that can't be turned on, all the darkness that can't be turned off. All right, so here's, some of the poems are really perfect crimey, as in they're quite literally it, and some aren't. Would have been terrible if I just stuck to the one idea. The perfect crime is a fortune teller off the midway. She reads the lines of your hands, your tea leaves, the bumps on your head. She shuffles the deck. But it's not your fate you want to know. It's who this fate is happening to. She pulls out her abacus and subtracts the stars and their houses. She factors out family history, DNA, national identity, religious denomination. She writes off decisions you've made, blunders, moments of happiness. What's left, you ask? Dreams? A belly laugh? The fertility of the color green? No, she says, looking up, her eyes like the first organisms floating in the Precambrian sea. What's left is me. So this poem references the next one, Cori. Cori is, well, she becomes, once she's dragged into the underworld by Dis or Hades, she becomes Persephone, who we basically know her by. But when she was a young girl, out in the far fields of Enna, just picking flowers with her friends, that was, well, that's what we know her as a girl. And of course, Cori is at that exact moment sort of taken by Hades, who comes up out of the underworld and abducts her, ravishes her, whatever that means, and brings her to the underworld. And that's kind of the Greek story of how girls become women, right? Don't pull any punches about that stuff. Anyway, so she appears in this poem, and it's really about the notion of a flower called a heliotrope. It's sort of like a sunflower, which is to say, you know, most plant life follows the sun, but not as fast as heliotrope does, which really follows. Even in the dark, underground, heliotrope will spread its leaves to greet the sun without so much as a peep. It's so quiet, you can hear the homage, periodicity reading along the lines with its fingertips. Through guttering torchlight, through stone, you lift your eyes, Cori, to follow the tireless circling of the circadian you're certain is seeking you. And of course the you that's seeking her is Demeter, who was her mom, and that's the myth of how we get the seasons. The Greek version of how we get the seasons, which is to say she turns the world to winter until Zeus negotiates Persephone's return for approximately half the year, and so thus the seasons. Everyone know what an awl is? Not A-L-L, A-W-L? The screwdriver-like thing that comes to a point. Okay. This, not that. Tat, not tit. She, not it. When, not if. Once, not twice. Now, not then. Now, not now and again. In, not out. Rhyme, not reason. Day, not season. Odd, not even. Here, not where the hole's been punched by nothing's all. Oh beauty, it's whole cloth, not piecework we want, the boxed set. So that first poem I read, Please Don't, is actually based on an Elizabeth Cotton song. You probably all know Freight Train, Freight Train. running so fast, right? And the line, please don't tell what train I'm on, comes directly from it, as a couple of other things. But here's another one that works off of kind of blues fiction. From the heart comes Morse code, the stone-breaking work song. Even in the late Holocene, John Henry was a little baby sitting on his daddy's knee. Inside the glacial core sample, the blues came before slavery, before the sieve of dominion. John Henry's pick was a volcano, his White House a parchment farm. It's a short step from heartbeat to heartache to flowering Judas. So bring me a little water, Sylvie, every little once in a while. Is anything more silent than the muscles that raise the arm or the flash of thought before pen plows its black nib across the page? Ink drying is just as quiet. Watching you, that's a quiet thing too, as is the way you smooth your eyebrow as you read, which I can hear only by fingering my own, just as I hear the breaths you take only by breathing in time to a ripple of blouse between your breasts that tightens and sags, tightens, sags. I don't know if they'll let me know if you think there's any progression to these things, like it's getting somewhere. And I don't mean transcendence, okay? Oh, here's an it, prominent it. It's not how you imagined it. Your prospects. If you were a folktale, you'd see the pattern. Youngest daughter, third wish. If you were a nation, you'd see how crooked the columns founded on stirring lies were. If you were a poem, only in retrospect would evasions veer into understanding, safeguarding the inchoate from off in flight. You have acquired the unasked for, which you've come to love. Child, word, Olymp, abdication. Now, it even feels like a choice. Even if you did, even if you counted backwards by hundreds, even if it were all it were cracked up to be, even if you stood, got counted, even if you stuck out your tongue, cut off your nose, even if you crossed back over the Bering Land Bridge, even if you split the difference, let bygones be, even if you lined up all the axe helves, even if you shifted the decimal point to the right, even if you gave the shirt off your back. Even then, it wouldn't matter. Walk out to the middle of the bridge and lean over the parapet. Watch the river braiding by. Can you see yourself in it? And yet, there you are, nevertheless. The loopholes. A star at the end. Sorry, that's not right. A star at the start. I just wanted to get to that word in. A star at the start, at the end, a bend in the road, and you've lost them. Mother, father, and the little piggy who ran all the way home. In between, it's the mystery genre. This will sound familiar. You know, something's happened, and there are cities ubiquitous as, and sorry, I put my glasses on. And there are clues, ubiquitous as rain, books of them. The Nine of Hearts, a lead pipe, a shattered wristwatch, perfume that makes you swoon, and stories that don't hold water or add up. And there's love or envy that caused the trouble in the first place, indelible as a cry, a sky-darkening cry, needle-thin and needle-threading, like light from a star too distant to detect. So this poem names who it's about or who I'm addressing halfway through it, but I was thinking about Andromache, who's the wife of Hector in the Iliad. Well, they sort of know in advance, as everybody in this world knows things in advance, that the Troy will fall, and that Astyanax, their son, will be thrown over the wall because you don't let the royalty's kids survive, right? You don't let there be any lineage, and she herself will be sold into slavery. She tells this to Hector, and nothing he can do about it. Well, it's beyond him, really. But this imagines her way before this happens. This imagines her when she's a young girl, really, before Achilles has killed her parents and her brothers, so that she's an orphan, and then she meets Hector after that. So it thinks of her early on. Which is to say, it thinks of us in that period before all bad stuff happens, right? At the window, she looks out into the perpetuity of beyond, whose water runs with pink and blue flowers and their Latin names. On the cutting board, a pomegranate whose cells will be tart when cut. One hand rests lightly on the sill. If I call her Andromache, it's to make you take notice, to wonder if this is Troy, if the vertigo of Astyanax ahead of her, if the vertigo of Astyanax is ahead of her, the future a lane between thick hedges of nevertheless and notwithstanding. It's so peaceful now. She can't have met Hector yet, or taken her place among the weavers. The perpetuity of out there falls over her arms as light streaming in, as inwardness. Whatever lies ahead, she feels herself equal to. That's what calmness is, a wall, and the certainty that there's a way to pass through. All right, if you want some hopefulness, here it comes. It's not going to last long. Don't blink. Not all. Some, perhaps. Some. The frayed end of addition, of subtraction. At least one. Maybe even none. That double take, that disbelief. Unlock the cedar chest, the safety deposit box, your heart, to make sure. Empty, it seems. Now, increase the magnification. There they are, all of them. Manifold, sundry, glut, surfeit, a conjuries, cornucopia. And here you are, committing the perfect crime in the reverse. You know, there's a great moment in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five where they run the war movie backwards. Because it's the only moment where the bombs which have fallen, the incendiaries that are creating the firestorms in Europe, the fire goes out, the bombs come back into the sky, they go back into the planes fly backwards, and they go back where they started from. And you can trace that back as far as you want. And in that book, that's hope. Okay. So just 3 more from this, and then just a couple of new ones. Oh, wait, this one's supposed to do last? I think. Let's see if I can write it. No, it's the word. Okay. Expiration date, before which you fill your basket, beyond which its shelf life is over. Like the word, I was supposed to tell you what the word morganatic means. That's the word I was just getting to. Morganatic is an adjective that goes to a kind of marriage in which someone of status, not in our contemporary time exactly, though it probably has its equivalents, marries someone beneath him. And all that he owns and will inherit will not go to her or the children. That's a morganatic marriage. Now I can start. All right. Expiration date, before which you fill your basket, beyond which its shelf life is over. Like the word morganatic, or a poem de-anthologized, like an after-image on the retina. Expiration date, which you can tell from the stamp, but not by the smell. Expiration date, the span between getting away with it and it no longer mattering. Between the brain scan and its results, between sentencing and final appeal. What doesn't go bad? Silica, prepositions, sunlight. What doesn't go bad? Her surprised smile or her surprised laughter. The storms of Jupiter. Date of expiry, a promise you've made that you haven't yet made good on. This is where I reverse them. So one of the fun things in writing this, which is I've done it other times, is setting yourself in the moment that you're writing the test or task of redefining something completely. You know, just, you know, it's a form of making shit up, right? But the thing about making shit up is that it's never really random. Okay? So I think I attempt to do this with sleep. Sleep, right, colon, and now, well, what comes with that? Here we go, sleep. The hole burned in grammar, Medusa peers out through. Sleep, that sea which closes over, the long migration of the eye back to its nest. You breathe its oxygen up and down Jacob's rungless ladder, tracing and retracing your unlikeliness on the limbic walls. Sleep, that orphanage where anything goes, where anode and cathode, the doors and the snakes scat sing your name. And the last one I'll read from the book, not the last poem, but the last of how I figured this thing out, what to read, goes this way. Done, black can be told from blue. Done, the robin hangs a question mark on each branch. A last car goes by with the small hope of its headlights on. The king is dead. Long live the queen. Effects without cause spread a gasoline rainbow before your eyes. Rendezvous resembles collision. Done, what isn't a clue? Uncommitted, waiting, winds the clock. Lilies on the kitchen table continue to open. The imperfect and the defective plan their coup d'etat. Usury of reasons, monocrop of crime scenes, cracks spider the mirror glass. Uncommitted, you must think you'll live forever. It's so quiet at this hour, you can't tell if it's suspense or aftermath, if it's night ending or a storm about to break. So quiet, you can hear your wishes opening, and the cool scent they give off in the dark seems to be coming from everywhere, from the living, from the dead, So that's Perfect Crime. When I was like looking for poems to read both from it and around, I realized that it's probably the only thing I write about. You get that shocking feeling that, oh, they're all really the same poem. But let's hope they're not. Well, or the secret is to make them not look like that's true. Somebody once said, poets really only have 2 or 3 poems to write, 2 or 3 poems to say, and they say them over and over in so many different ways. So, like 5 pieces of paper and I can't even keep them straight. There's one more. Maybe it's on the back side. Oh, yes. Okay. All right, so I couldn't do this reading without getting some cow into this or other. I spent a lot of time with cows in the last number of years, and they're actually rather dear to my heart. I actually like them a lot more than I like horses, just because I live with them. So, we can argue about this later.
Oh, you bet.
So this is one of the cow poems. This one is just connected to dairy cows. These are dairy cows. This is a winter poem. This was a tough night, the beginning part of this poem. It's pretty biographical. And it's called Declaration of Sentiments. You all know that Declaration of Sentiments and Rights, of course, is the great manifesto from the women's movement in the 19th century. But it's just Declaration of Sentiments. The cow went down by the feed trough and couldn't get up. The concrete icy, her back legs splayed, temp below 0, the wind brutal. We braced her hooves and urged her up with prods and kicks. We put straw beneath her and covered her with a tarp until the sling could be gotten to lift her with the skid steer. Other cows crowded close. They butted us, agitated when we laid the tarp over her. I loved them for that. In the dry cow barn, that's where the pregnant cows are. In the dry cow barn, heavy and swaying, they'll cluster around a newborn to keep us at bay. A cow will protect a calf as if it were her own. Last summer, when a just-born bull, wet from the licking off, still rocky on its pins, was carted off, a Holstein, herself ready to birth, broke through the fence into the road to bellow inconsolably as the trailer drove away, which didn't change a thing, but to make me feel amazed and small. Clear cut. All the way to the trees, snow fell, and all the way through them, it fell, till we got to where they'd been taken down carelessly. The big ones skidded out, pine and poplar and 20-year-old oak felled and left every which way like matchsticks. It was ugly and denuding, and when the snow melted, it would still be ugly, and the guy who owned it would still be deep in debt, and his wife still drifting through the house on meds, a zombie. The long meadow between his windows and where we stood couldn't disguise the mess the loggers had made, and what for. All the way back through the trees, which belonged to another neighbor, it snowed. These useless woods, turkeys like for beach mast, and hunters for the turkeys, and the deer that nibble the growing tips and rub their horns off on fallen limbs, and which the emerald ash borer likes for the ash trees we take down for firewood when their crowns thin overhead and let in more and more light each summer, which was far off and not on either of our minds, as the snow fell workmanlike and the stoical trees dark against the white of snow did what trees do. Last poem. Come in at the right time. Right. This poem is called Elysian, not Elysian Fields, or it could be, or Kyrie, but Elysian as in when what a vowel is left out, or words are brought together, and often an apostrophe will sort of mark the spot. The stars were dead, if bright meant dead, and the goldenrod was dead, if gray in the wind and stiff meant dead. The shovel in my hands went in, it thought nothing of the hole that grew. Both shovel and hole were dead. The dog that went in looked alive, and the girl who stood in the star dark didn't cry, alive to the murmuring air, immense and empty, that washed over our standing there as the shovel did its moving work. The dog indifferent to the dirt that rose around it. Then a piece of the moon also rose, and it was deadest of all, beautiful and votive, and touch me not, goodbye alive. And we were done, if done means never done, and touch me not means touch me. Thank you all.